Some leaders stay in power for long periods of time and don't make much of a difference to world affairs, but some leaders leave a perpetual imprint of their actions on global affairs. Trump, for example, stayed in power for exactly 4 years, but within these 4 years, he permanently changed the way the world looked at China. And now that we think of it, Trump has also ended up changing the way things are done inside China. Till only very recently, Xi Jinping was an unquestionable leader in China. However, Trump's actions have started showing their effect almost 7 months after his term as the US president ended. Today, Xi Jinping is facing signs of dissent and rebellion from within the Chinese Communist Party, and he is at the risk of losing power if the growing disillusionment isn't controlled. And this is all because of the Trump-era sanctions that have left a profound impact on the CCP. Hi and welcome to TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I am your host Shubhangi, and in this video I will tell you how sanctions imposed by Trump are fueling resentment against Xi Jinping within the Chinese Communist Party. Let's begin. Former US President Donald Trump is no longer in power, but his actions and legacy continue to hurt his biggest rival, Chinese President Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping may be a brutal dictator, but even he can't afford to lose favor with the Chinese Communist Party officials. However, despite the best of his efforts, Xi Jinping seems to be facing adverse sentiment within the CCP over Trump-era sanctions. When Trump was in power, the US imposed a number of sanctions and visa restrictions on Communist Party officials over Xi Jinping's hawkish policies in the South China Sea and blatant violation of human rights in Hong Kong and Xinjiang. Till now, Chinese officials continue to reel under the burden of Trump-era restrictions, and they seem to blame Xi's high-handedness for their troubles. CCP officials have a lot of personal interests in the United States. They develop business interests, purchase properties in the US, send their kids for attaining education in the US, and are even tempted by the freedoms offered in the US. You don't get all of this in China. And hence, Xi Jinping is facing rising dissent. As per Nikkei Asia, there is a growing discontent among some of Xi Jinping's fellow second-generation Reds, a term used to describe children of revolutionary-era CCP leaders. They are concerned about Xi Jinping's political style that relies on policies like Xi Jinping thought in order to make some kind of a demigod out of himself. Xi Jinping's political style reeks of personality cult, which is banned under the CCP's constitution. Opposition from the CCP to Xi Jinping's high-handedness and its serious consequences are actually becoming quite clear now. Last year, Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Xi Feng met US Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman in Tianjin. Interestingly, of all things, revoking sanctions on party officials was right at the top of China's demands. This simply shows the level of dissatisfaction in the CCP officials over Trump-era sanctions and the high degree of pressure that Xi Jinping faces within the party. At the end of the day, everyone in China understands that Chinese officials got sanctioned only because of Xi Jinping's roguish behavior. Over a dozen CCP officials were targeted with sanctions due to the Hong Kong crackdown alone. CCP officials were also targeted by Trump over the concentration camps being operated in Xinjiang. One of such CCP officials targeted by US sanctions included regional Communist Party boss Chen Quanguo, who sits on the all-powerful CCP Politburo. The Trump administration had even warned Xi Jinping of sanctions over CCP dictatorship, but Xi was simply uncontrollable in his behavior. In fact, Trump continued to hurt the Chinese Communist Party till the very end of his tenure as the US president. In January this year, Trump imposed sanctions on Chinese officials for Beijing's misdeeds in the hotly contested waters of the South China Sea. At the end of the day, it is the CCP officials who've had to face the consequences of Xi Jinping's coercive behavior inside and outside China. And therefore, they have every right to be angry with Xi Jinping. This is why they're fuming at the Chinese president. In fact, signs of disillusionment with Xi Jinping within the CCP had started emerging last year itself. Opposition to Xi Jinping has been visibly increasing since 2020. Many senior CCP cadres, officials, students, intellectuals, and scholars went as far as criticizing and slamming Chinese President Xi Jinping on social media, even at the risk of facing censure and punishment from the Xi administration. Some of Xi Jinping's more popular critics, such as Xu Zhongkrun, Xu Qiyong, Chang Chuyong, and Yu Linqi, also took to WeChat and demanded that Xi Jinping steps down. Such posts went viral on Chinese social media and inflicted considerable damage to Xi Jinping's image within China. A major sign of serious discontent within the CCP also got revealed by a March 22nd WeChat report, which disclosed that princelings, the children of high-level veteran party cadres, called for an emergency enlarged meeting of the Chinese Communist Party's Politburo to discuss Xi Jinping's replacement. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping is looking to ward off the pressure being piled on him from within the party by mobilizing the masses with populist actions. Xi Jinping has resorted to some big decisions like allowing Chinese couples to have 3 children, ending for-profit tutoring, and capping the amount of homework that can be assigned to children. For Xi Jinping, mitigating the soaring education costs in China's megacities or allowing couples to have 3 kids is a part of his policy to mobilize public opinion in his favor and counterbalance the growing signs of dissent and rebellion within the CCP. Xi Jinping's future hangs in the balance, primarily because of the Trump-era sanctions against CCP officials and the negative sentiment that they are generating against the Chinese president.